What is up, guys? It is Monday night, run night. Nice zone 2 run. Not so nice. It was a little warmer, making sure my tattoo's covered. Heart rate was running a little high. So, coupled with frustrations of today, I suppose, it was kind of challenging. But ultimately, just a couple walks in there to slow down my heart rate. I think things have been a little bit up or down. I think my heart rate's changing. For the first time in a while, my max heart rate changed on my Garmin. I have no idea how that really knows that or how it judges that. So we'll kind of see what impact that has on my training moving forward. I did change a couple of the settings probably about a month ago. I think I talked about that. Maybe 2-3 weeks. Time flies sometimes. But ultimately, still putting in the miles, still putting in the time. The ankle feels okay. The runs are not terrible. It's not painful there. It's just a little tender. So ultimately, I think I need to watch it when it comes to bouldering more than anything. I think I would put a lot of pressure on it, and therefore it just kind of stays strained. I do really need to probably ice it a little bit. Now they say rice is not exactly the protocol, but I think for a strained ligament, it still might be that. I've been doing it for a long time. Seems to help. I think I'm gonna stick with it. But I have not iced it in a while. So one thing I want to talk about, or what I would really like to talk about today, is pulling something from stoicism. So in the studies that I've done, primarily from books from Ryan Holiday, but I've also gone through a lot of meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I have not finished them yet. But the way that he's laid it out, Ryan Holiday has, is as 3 disciplines: discipline of perception, discipline of action, and discipline of will. And I'd like to focus in on the discipline of perception. This is something that I've been working on immensely since I started studying stoicism, and I think is just a very key point that I'd like to pull out of today as a significant thing that I think if you work on this discipline, and if you work on the element of understanding your perception and how that impacts your day-to-day and how you perceive events and ultimately judge those events and therefore most likely guide your emotions in response to them and ultimately probably drive your actions in response to them, it could be very freeing or help you to behave in a manner that you want to, right? A lot of times when we perceive things negatively, it will lead us down a path of then negative emotions and then negative responses or negative actions that we take. It's just inherent in human nature. It's a model that I learned from crucial conversations. I tend to see that it plays out that way. I think that if you do some self-reflection, you can see that it plays out that way in a ton of experiences, and you can really probably connect to that in a bunch of regards. I've talked about self-reflection before, and I think it's critical in identifying paths exactly like this and the ultimate root cause of what leads to your actions. But talking about this a little bit, our perceptions are distorted by our own image, by our own mental image that's developed over time. And the strength and health of our mental image will thereby distort how we perceive events. If we're very self-conscious and insecure, that can have a lot of negative impacts on how we perceive things. I've struggled with this in the past. As you build confidence in certain arenas or in certain realms or in overall, and you connect it with the idea of the discipline of perception, I think you can become a much clearer thinker that thereby is a much clearer actor. Behavior. I think it's an interesting thing to note is that our senses are often fooled, right? What we see is not always what was seen. Like, it's not necessarily we saw exactly what it was that happened in the way that it happened. This goes the same for hearing. I think it probably shows up in smells. Smells can be misleading. Can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but it's probably totally true. And just in general, we know that our senses are not absolute truths of the universe or of the world and of our experience of it. Yet when we get into thinking and therefore perceiving of events, I think we're often led down these paths towards actions that are discolored or jaded by our mental image and our perception that ultimately is not reflective of the way we want to behave and the way that we want to react. It's all discolored. But we often just trust this. And I think that that's something that I would caution. I would generally understand that our perceptions are our own choice and are entirely within our control. And events can be objective. This is one of the lessons of stoicism. And it's one of, in my opinion, one of the most powerful lessons that I feel that I have learned is instead of applying a perception and instead of trying to understand why things have happened or why they've happened to me, you can avoid wasting the energy of that conversation or of that thought process with yourself, that internal dialogue or internal monologue, I suppose. We make events subjective. We apply judgments to them. And understanding that that's a choice that we do not have to make. We can treat events as being objective, that they are neither good or bad. We understand, or if you come to the understanding that your perceptions are not to just be trusted, that they're often not based in facts and evidence, you can understand that they're going to lead you to the wrong behaviors and not who you want to be. So my recommendation and the way that I've been trying to live is to leave events as they are. Just, they're objective events. They're neither good nor bad. It's really just something that has happened, and we get to dictate and determine how we want to respond relative to those events. The events can be thought of as a piece of information, as a piece of data for us to make informed decisions as we move forward. Information doesn't need to be good or bad, like we apply that label to it, same as we do to events. But it can be useful as we move forward and understand what we want to have in our life or not. Some events cannot be ignored. They're just going to happen to you, or they're going to happen to those that you care about. Death is a natural part of life, and sometimes that happens. But we don't have to label them or judge them, and we can process them and take them as they are. This isn't to remove the emotion from situations, it's to understand that our emotions are primarily guided by our perceptions and our judgments of an event, or of a piece of information, or of a thing, or of a person. I think it's incredibly useful to frame things as information, as pieces of information and pieces of evidence that you are collecting to ultimately make your case and make the best decision possible. Being a pursuer of evidence or a collector of evidence is a very useful perspective or useful way of thinking. Our perceptions can be misleading, the entire point of this video. So ultimately, don't trust your perceptions and judge and determine your actions based upon those potential emotions that arise from your perceptions, from your perceiving an event in a discolored or jaded or distorted view. Seek clarity and understanding, especially in those relationships that matter the most to you, or in arenas, in areas in which they matter the most to you. I'm a very introspective person, so I've struggled with this for years and years and years, and until I've adopted these mindsets, I have not found relief, and I have not found a better way to move through life. It removes a lot of the negative thinking. It enables you to reduce the levels of stress because you're perceiving things so negatively and potentially against yourself. And it reduces levels of anxiety. Understanding that I could think through hundreds of different reasonings for something being the way it is, or just understanding that it is what it is, and that's all there is to it. It is not always useful to understand the why or the motivations behind a thing. And the first introduction to this lesson that I ever had was to assume positive intent. And whether or not it's right or wrong, it's useful. Like at the end of the day, if there is ill will out there, I don't know if it benefits you to know it other than to be careful around it. But if you are true to who you are and true to your journey and true to your goals, I think ultimately you'll get there no matter the detractors that might try to bring you down. You can only be the best version of yourself. If they choose to behave in a way that is not with virtue, let it happen. You stay the course. You can't lose if you don't quit.